Hey, how's it going? How are we doing, my compadres? My name's Jihad and this is Uncomplex. And today I have for you a couple tips and tricks on how to make your footage more cinematic. How we digging this look? I just wanted to change it up a little bit, change things around, move things around. I noticed from here there's a little bit more of an echo because I'm literally talking into my kitchen, into an alcove. But hey, I just want to change it around a bit, see how it looks. I kind of like it, to be honest. Anyway, so you got an FPV drone. Maybe you had it for a while or you just got a new one. Say for instance, the DJI FPV. This little bugger, DJI FPV drone. Maybe you just got yourself that. You've been flying it, you've been taking it through the simulator, took it out to the real world, flew it around a bit, and you think you got your bearings, you know what you're doing now. And then you look at the footage and it's actually nice footage, it's actually quite decent. But how do you bring it up to the next level? How do you make it, give it that extra oomph, What do you do to do that? I'm gonna tell you what to do. To cut it short, get a GoPro, because here's the thing. The inbuilt camera of the DJI FPV drone, it's good, it's not bad. I mean, the image you get in your goggles when you're flying, it's actually revolutionary for the entire FPV world. But like, cinematic wise, it actually it's not bad, but it ain't as great. Like, there are ways to make it better. And the simplest way of doing that is getting a GoPro. If you already have the normal FPV drone, the normal skeletal type drones, they're already built with a GoPro to be put in front in mind already. But if you have this drone, you're gonna want to invest in a top mount right here so that you can put your GoPro on top. If you're trying to get this one, I'll leave a link in the description for this. And the tips I'm gonna be giving today, they also apply for the FPV drone itself. Like, you can apply it to the drone, but there will be limitations. Why do I recommend a GoPro? 3 things: super view, dynamic range, and stabilization. Like, the camera already inbuilt in the FPV drone, it's not bad, it's good, it can work. But the focal range isn't as wide as a GoPro, nor is the dynamic range as good as a GoPro. And the stabilization, while it's still not bad, yeah, it's not as good as a GoPro either. Though there are certain things you gotta do with the GoPro in order to get maximum stability in post, which I'll explain later on. That's one of the tips. First things first, what you're gonna need is some of these. ND filter. Neutral density filters. You chuck this at the front of your drone, and what you'll notice is the footage actually gets darker. Doesn't things look better when you put on glasses? You notice the highlights a bit more, you can see more detail in the highlights of whatever you're looking at. Same principles kind of apply to a camera as well. So you put this in front of your lens and you'll notice that your footage gets darker. What this allows you to do is decrease your shutter speed to double your frame rate, whatever your frame rate is at the time. So for instance, on the FPV drone, the lowest frame rate it can go to is 60 frames per second. So your shutter speed will be 120, but you can't keep it at a fixed shutter speed of 120 because your footage will still be overexposed. Therefore, you put these at the front. And there are ND filters for the FPV drone that you can purchase online. I got these ones for my GoPro Hero 8. So I put these in front of my GoPro Hero 8, which is running at 24 frames per second. In doing so, I got to comply with the 180 shutter rule, bringing my shutter speed to 48, double my frame rate. This causes the motion blur to look way more cinematic, and for me, it just makes the FPV footage look way more better in my opinion. Like, it really makes you feel like you're traveling at speed whenever you fly past objects. So ND filters, use them. I got these off Amazon, link in the description if you're trying to purchase. Next tip, your settings. I'll explain the settings I used in the FPV drone and then the GoPro settings, but on the FPV drone, to get the most out of the FPV drone, I use 4K 60. DJI has said that they're gonna introduce lower frame rates in their settings in a firmware update whenever that happens, but till then, I'll be using 4K 60. I would change the shutter speed to 1/120, but I don't have ND filters for the drone itself, so I'm gonna have to leave it in auto. Then I changed the color profile to D-Center-like for maximum flexibility when color grading in post. And yeah, that's it for the FPV. My GoPro settings, however, I start off with super view, one of the main reasons to use a GoPro. 4K 24 with a 4:3 aspect ratio. Why? I'll explain why in a minute. Hyper smooth off, while I'll also explain in a minute. And my bitrate set to high, to gather as much information as I can to use in post-production. My shutter speed set to 1/48, double my frame rate, the magic number. White balance I generally leave at auto, but to be safe, I would use an amount based on my environment, but I'm lazy and I don't like changing my settings very often. So I tend to trust the auto setting for my white balance. My ISO minimum and maximum is set to 100. 100 just has the least amount of noise and brings the clearest image, but it's all very dependent on the lighting where you're flying, so adjust to your environment really. My sharpness is set to low, like I did try high, I didn't like the look that much. It was a bit too digital for me, so I set it to low, and if I want to add sharpness, I can also do that later in post. Generally though, low does look more cinematic. It gives your footage that soft glow element that you kind of see in movies sometimes. Not that much, but it's there. My color profile is set to flat for increased dynamic range and flexibility wear, post-production. And those are the main settings I use on my GoPro Hero 8. So there's this scratch on the edge of my lens of my GoPro. So I'm thinking of upgrading to the Hero 9, but at the same time, it kind of makes my footage, I don't know, it adds this kind of cinematic lens flare to it that I'm kind of vibing with. You know, it's not that bad. But I did purchase a new lens to replace the lens anyway, but I'll see how I feel. Depending on how it looks, I'll see how I feel about changing the lens or just keeping it the way it is. Third step, after you've done getting your settings right and you applied the ND filter on the front, you're flying. If you've seen the footage of an FPV drone, you can understand that immersive feeling you get when watching it. It almost feels like you're flying, as if you're a bird soaring through the skies, just weaving past these trees or just flowing over mad mountainscape. And it's all very smooth and very silky. And in order to do that, what would help is actually flying smoothly. It's just so immersive. Like, I don't say that enough in my impressions video, but it really is. So fly as smooth and as silky as you can to your best ability, unless you're showcasing your acrobatic ability with the FPV drone, doing flips and power loops and split S, whatever moves you're trying to do. If that's what you're trying to showcase, then by all means, go nuts, do that. But if you're just trying to portray the environment you're flying in, then to your best ability, fly as smooth as you can. It'll also help for stability afterwards. And another recommendation is to fly close to obstacles, close to objects, whether it be the ground or trees or gaps. I feel like that's like one of the main reasons you fly an FPV drone, to feel that little bit of rush. Oh my God. But at the same time, fly to the best of your ability. Fourth tip, stabilization. So before I was talking about, so the aspect ratio on my GoPro is set to 4:3, which is a bit of a wider frame. And the reason for this is a program called RealSteady made for GoPro. It's a stabilization software where you put your footage into the program. It'll read all the gyro data from your GoPro and stabilize your footage from that information, getting rid of all that shaky cam. With the 4:3 aspect ratio, RealSteady has more real estate to make the necessary corrections and stabilize the footage for you. Like what I noticed in my first cinematic run, at one point, the footage looked as if it missed a frame, like it skipped a beat. I was still able to salvage some of it, but at the same time, changing my aspect ratio to 4:3 seemed to fix the problem, because before that, I was doing 16:9, which is a much more narrow field of view. But once you put it through RealSteady, it will crop the image to a 16:9 aspect ratio anyway, and still use the information that you don't see. The DJI FPV itself has inbuilt stabilization, and it does work pretty well. You won't see it when using the goggles, but it will save onto your SD card as stabilized footage. Not as good as RealSteady, but stabilization nonetheless. What are we up to now? 4 or 5? I think we're up to 5. Tip number 5, post-production. So in my settings, I also set my color profile to flat. So at first, the image, it looks a bit grayed out, desaturated, but once you bring it to your editing software, that's where you can bring it back to life. I use Premiere Pro for my editing. You can use whatever software you use. Editing, color grading is really the fun part. Changing your flat profile to a finely graded image. In future, I do hope to make some presets, some LUTs that you can apply to your own footage, but at the moment I'm just manually grading everything. And I kind of enjoy the color grading process, so I don't mind that at the moment. And there's also heaps of LUTs online that you're able to use and put on your own footage. So just search up online for GoPro LUTs, if you will, and they'll bring out some pretty decent looking images. And then the last thing, I think this is 6. I think we're up to tip number 6. The last thing you're gonna wanna do is sound design. You don't have to do it. You can just chuck on a song and be done with it. That's it, you're done. But what I like to do is add a little bit of the extra sound design. Just bump up the level of your footage just by that much. It's subtle, but at the same time, it helps a lot. Really brings it to life even more. I've said that too many times in this video. This is all up to you really, because sound design can take a bit of time and a bit of finesse, but I feel it's worth that extra effort just to add in that extra as you pass objects and stuff like that. Trust, it will bring your footage up another level. And now we've completed a cinematic piece. That is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, learned something, or simply were entertained, leave a like and or subscribe. I would truly appreciate it. And that's all I have for you, mi compadres. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.